I know where you're thinking. The US debt is already over $36 trillion, and it is pretty bad. And I would agree with you. I can argue with that fact. But my question would be, what is the actual number that breaks things apart, that collapses the whole system? Is that 40 trillion? Is that 100 trillion or more, or even better? Why hasn't the system collapsed yet? So this is basically what we're going to be talking about today. For those who don't know me, I'm a new face here. So my name is Renaorno. I'm a macro analyst at 21st Capital, and it's going to be my pleasure to talk about the fundamentals of the monetary system. So basically, the plumbing, how it really works, how liquidity is created. Because without understanding that, we cannot understand what happens to Bitcoin and the price. I know that everybody is interested in that, but if you see the price action of Bitcoin as a product, I'm going to be focusing on the factory and the raw materials. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So let's start with the actual debt. So yeah, it does not look any worse. It cannot look any worse than that. But the problem is, isolation is when you observe the US in isolation, it creates some problems there. Of course, I would completely agree with you. That is basically a country that is on the verge of hyperinflation, for example, or just that, or maybe default, right? However, the US debt it cannot be seen in isolation. So we have a monetary system that depends not only on the dollar as the monetary uh, intermediate, right? The global reserve currency that all countries need as a passport to transact between themselves commercially and financially. But the US debt is very different from everybody else, like the German bond, for example, or the French debt, or the JGBs in Japan, for example. Why is that? So since 2008, especially, our monetary system has organized itself in treating the US debt as the pristine collateral for credit. So basically, the way it works is everybody needs dollars on the left to transact, right? So it's your passport. However, how do you get those dollars? You need credit. But instead of relying on a bank or a specific bank that you have a relationship, since 2008, because of the whole collapse of the system, and we can talk about it later, how it was bigger than we thought, this the US data was actually used as a pristine collateral where you present that, you post that into a transaction, and you get credit because of that. So if you don't pay for any reason, you're going to be able to quickly liquidate that because everybody would accept US bonds or treasuries, as for the matter. So this specific thing is called repo, and repo is the core of liquidity worldwide. So it's not really a credit. It's more like, as the name says, it's a repurchasing agreement. So you have an initial transaction where I need cash, so I give you my bonds, right? It's like I'm selling those bonds, but I'm going to repurchase them tomorrow on a very short term for a little higher than what I sold. So this is my interest. So basically, it's a repurchasing agreement. It's a buy and sell transaction, but it works as credit. And this is fundamental for us to understand exactly what's happening, because a lot of people, if you don't if you follow FinTwit, for example, you're going to see a lot of these charts where you see M2, which is the global money supply, and Bitcoin just following that. But I'm not arguing against it. The correlation is there. But I would like just to be a little careful, because M2 is not that liquid as we think. It's a very simplistic description of a very complex problem. And because the monetary system is much complex than we think, this is why we're going to dive deeper, because I don't have any time to explain the whole monetary system in a few minutes. But this is why we have our Bitcoin intelligence reports, where we're going to dive deep into that and understanding exactly what's happening. So this is already a great work done done by our team, led by Sina, and I'm going to be contributing to that as well. And we just launched a new report today and on Monday. And you can just click the link below if you want to see what we're talking about, and make sure to use the promo code as well for 5% off on your subscription. So this is where we dive deep, and I'm going to give you a lot of our team is going to give you a lot of tools so that you know exactly what's happening to Bitcoin, to risk assets, and also how liquidity is actually driving that. Okay, so back to our talk here. So basically, repo is this yin and yang, this back and forth that is done by trillions of dollars every single day to generate the liquidity. The problem is the U.S. is been used as the piggy bank of the world, so to speak. So we buy stuff from abroad, buy imports. This is why our deficits are so high, because of having the actual dollar as the global reserve currency. So that forces the United States to be in that position. On the other hand, the United States makes a lot of money by that flow of dollars that were exported to come back into the United States, into financial markets, right? So it's always a back and forth. So basically, this is why the United States had such a financialized economy, so to speak. Right? Maybe you can agree that we need to go back to manufacturing. It's not a political matter, but this is how the monetary system works. And repo and liquidity, as long as this is a healthy transaction where we have liquidity going on, we have a supply of enough bonds into the system, especially outside of the United States, what we call the Eurodollar system, and that has nothing to do with euros. It's just outside of the United States. That system needs not only needs dollars, but also needs a whole supply of these bonds, which is completely crazy, because you could ask me, if we print more and more of the bonds or even dollars, how is everybody else going to absorb it? And this is the tricky part that I may leave you with on this video, is that for any kind of credit, any kind of lending that you do, let's say you lend $1 million, somebody needs to pay it back plus interest. So whoever needs credit abroad, for example, especially abroad, since they're not able to print their own dollars, they're going to need to generate activity to pay it back plus interest. That means that demand for U.S. debt, for as crazy as it is, as you can see on this chart, is always higher than supply, which is absolutely mind-blowing, right? So even if you think of the U.S. in isolation, so we have $36 trillion in debt, the US dollar denominated debt outside of the United States is actually higher, magnitudes higher. We don't even know exactly how much it is. And another thing is that debt is not against the US or the creditors or all countries, and they owe to themselves, which makes everything more and more complicated. I think Brent Johnson is one of the people who talk a lot about that. It's basically the dollar milkshake theory. So it creates kind of a web that holds the whole thing together, because it creates a future demand of dollars that need to be generated to serve the current debt that is owed. And regardless if we want to de-dollarize, or if we have, for example, right now we have a whole narrative of the U.S. debt not being trustworthy, or a downgrade by Moody's, this creates a lot of illusions about what's really going on in the plumbing. So there is absolutely no other asset on earth that can replace U.S. Treasuries as of today. So this actually moves the market. Of course, we need to follow exactly what's going on. It doesn't mean that the system doesn't have any problems, and I'm not defending the system at all. On the contrary, it's a very flawed system if you think about it. Because if you really wanted to bring that debt to zero, let's say, oh, I want to get rid of the deficits, of the fiscal deficit of the United States. This would completely break the system, which is completely insane if you think about it, because U.S. bonds are used as collateral. So this is a little bit mind-boggling, and we're going to be talking a lot about that. But it is what it is, regardless if we like it or not. This is how it works. So this is exactly the kind of monetary mechanics that we're going to be following more and more on our reports, so that you can see exactly how Bitcoin and gold, for the matter, both of those assets, but especially Bitcoin, can use the flow of new money that comes in, that goes for M2, for example, but everything else, and sucks that liquidity as an asset that it's becoming. So Bitcoin has a very special place right now, especially in the last couple of months, towards a global asset that is getting part of that liquidity, and increasingly so. So this is going to be a very special moment from now on, and also with the whole political landscape in the United States, and what comes to regulation of Bitcoin, this is going to become more and more interesting. So we're going to talk a lot about that, not only in this report, but in future reports, and also a lot of videos as well. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. So it's a complicated matter, but fascinating to see how everything that, I mean, the US that should have collapsed years ago is still going. So it's more complicated than we think, and it's going to be my pleasure to see you in the next video, so we'll discuss about that. Take care.